What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Young Guns podcast. We got a special guest today, Jesse Marshall from The Athletic, who covers the Pittsburgh Penguins, and he's also on the Staff and Graph podcast on Sportsnet. So thank you, Jesse, for coming on. Really appreciate it.
On anytime, guys. Hope you're having a good summer.
Oh yeah, well, really good for Montreal. So actually some pretty decent moves, but so.
Yeah.
Uh, also, I'd like to say that this video is sponsored by Bet99. So if you like sports, fantasy, casino games, sign up to Bet99 today. Link is in the description below. Use Young Guns 1 as the code. Must be 19 plus, and please play responsibly. And it's also sponsored by the Mind Foundation Canada, a charity organization that supports mental health and neurological diseases. The link will be in the description below to donate today. So, Luca, do you want to start off with some questions about the Penguins here today?
Yes. So obviously, as you know, with the Pittsburgh Penguins this season, I would say not a quiet off season, but I would say it's probably one of the less busy compared to other teams in the NHL. In terms of the off season, and I think that the Pittsburgh Penguins did a lot of a lot of moves. They made a lot of re-signings as well. They signed Malkin, they signed Letang, and I'm just going to get right into it. What were your thoughts on obviously re-signing Letang, re-signing Malkin, and just kind of the direction that the Penguins are heading in at the moment? We looked at a team, and at least when me and Kris, me and the guys talked about this on the podcast in the past, we believe that the Pittsburgh Penguins should be headed towards a rebuild, but it looks like, at least for the moment, or at least until Crosby and Malkin retire, that it looks like the Penguins are going to try to go for it as much as possible to try to win, another Stanley Cup. So what's your thoughts just on the direction of this team, and obviously signing Malkin and Letang to those, big contracts that they both received?
Yeah, it was Brian Rust too, right?
Yeah.
I think that was kind of the shocking part, was that, in the evaluation of what was going to happen with the quote unquote core of the team, I don't think there was any scenario that anyone drew up on paper that had all three of those players coming back. From a money standpoint, it just didn't seem to make any sense. We've seen the market. It took discounts, I think, frankly, from all of the players involved to make it happen. But I think it was a really strong piece of work from Ron Hextall. And frankly, guys, look, the question for the Penguins was, do you let go of Letang and let go of Malkin? And I'll throw two names at you that were like really popular in terms of replacements, quote unquote, is John Klingberg and Vince Trocheck, right?
Yes.
If you are Ron Hextall and you go out and sign Klingberg and Trocheck, does that put you on like a Colorado level? No,
Probably not.
it doesn't, right?
No.
Neither does keeping Letang and Malkin, right? So I think if you're presented with both options, keep the band together, right? Like, you're going to win at least over the hearts and minds of the people in Pittsburgh. I think they wanted this. Like 97% of the city probably wanted this to happen. And let's be honest, like, I think it's really a challenge for general managers to not overreact, right?
Yeah.
And the Penguins last year were down to their third goalie. Just game 7, Tristan Jarry plays with a broken foot, pretty much. It was an ugly situation as far as the goaltending was concerned. And the year before that, Jarry himself kind of craps the bed, and just plays the worst series of his life. So I think you kind of you look at all this stuff going down, right? And I think it's super easy to say, if you're on Hextall, like, we got to blow it up. We need this new blood. We need a Klingberg, right? We need all this. I think what he did was say, like, no, like, we probably could have won at least in the first round the last 2 years. I think we're a little bit more competitive than our results were, suggesting. And I think at the end of the day, we want to run it back. And I think everybody's happy with those decisions. There's still questions, right? Like, goaltending is a question. There's those are fair things to ask, right? As far as the direction that we're in. And, if goaltending is the reason you lost the last 2 years and you've done nothing to address it, is that not the definition of insanity? But I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of people who sleep on how good the Penguins have been in the regular season, and how competitive they've been, and almost winning a really difficult division a couple times. This is a team that hasn't yet been struck by father time. So I think from Hextall's perspective, right, this is still a very competitive team.
Yeah, and I think obviously, like you mentioned before, and I
And
personally,
about
I watched the Penguin series, and obviously they performed at a really high like level, and especially against the Rangers. I thought they outplayed the Rangers, especially in the first 4 games of the series. They were up 3-1 in that series. It looked like, okay, this is gonna Pittsburgh's gonna finish this in 5 or 6, and they're gonna move on to the second round. And then obviously, like you said, I think goaltending played a big part in the reason why the Penguins failed to make it out of the first round last year, and it's been a couple of years like that now. But I think a lot of Penguins fans, at least the ones that I've spoken to, at least all believe in Tristan Jarry, and I think they believe that he's capable of becoming that goaltender for the future and the guy that potentially leads Pittsburgh to another Stanley Cup at some point if they do end up getting there. But I look at the Malkin and Letang contracts as well as part of it, and I'm like, I understand where Pittsburgh's trying to go for, right? You're trying to make sure that Sidney Crosby tries to finish his career with on the best possible team with another opportunity at winning a Stanley Cup, even though he's already got 3. And I think that Pittsburgh want to make sure that Crosby gets off and Crosby and Malkin retire on a high. And I think they've done a really good job at being consistent and making the playoffs every year consistently. And like you mentioned before, how well they've been during the regular season. I think that goes under the radar at times too, right? We always talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins being that team that ends up making the playoffs anyways. But I just think that it's an era now where we're in 2022, and I just think like at what point do Pittsburgh look at this and go, you know what, we should probably start tearing it down and start focusing on the future. Because one of the biggest things too, and I don't know if Kris wants to chime in on this after, but I look at Pittsburgh's prospect pool and I'm not too impressed with what's out there, right? And so it's a little bit concerning, because if this team, let's say for whatever reason, decide we're going to keep going for this and we're going to keep going for it, well, when it does come time to rebuild, they're going to have to do a full-on, tear down of this squad, because they don't have young guys coming up that are going to be replacing those Crosby and Malkin. And obviously, Crosby and Malkin are irreplaceable no matter how you look at it. But, to kind of have that next generation of players coming up to fill that void, Pittsburgh don't have that right now compared to other teams in the league. So this is kind of a big gamble on Brian Burke and Ron Hextall to make this decision and say, you know what, we're going to stick with the core and we're going to hope that we become contenders and we win another Stanley Cup. Because if we don't, well, then Pittsburgh's going to be in a tough spot for years to come. And I don't know how ready Pittsburgh fans in general are going to be, expecting that, because we know how bad Pittsburgh was in the early 2000s when they got Crosby, and then they got Crosby and Malkin, and things changed for them, and obviously Marc-Andre Fleury as well. So I'm just, I'm kind of surprised that they went the route of signing Letang and Malkin to those big deals. I don't know if Kris wants to chime in a little bit here on just.
Yeah, well, what I don't understand is why they would sign them. I would assume Sidney Crosby is retiring after his contract, so he's got 3 years left. So I find it odd that they all signed past Sidney Crosby's contract. I figured they would at least come back so that they all end around the same time, because Malkin's going to be 40 by the time the contract ends, and I'm pretty sure it's the same thing for Kris Letang. So it's kind of odd, and I'm also surprised that well, I'm kind of high on this. I like this player, and a lot of people disagree with me, but I'm surprised at least they didn't give it Max Domi a chance. I feel like he would have been a good signing on this team to make them a bit younger. I also don't understand the Jeff Petry deal. Like, you go and get an older defenseman when your team's already aging, and his contract too is not looking too good. So I don't know. I find a year where they could have at least got the team, made the team a little bit younger. They go and get guys or they bring back guys who, I mean, Kris Letang is decent, but Malkin, I feel like he's kind of losing it a bit, injury prone. Jeff Petry too didn't have the best season last year. I mean, obviously the team as a whole didn't perform. But I feel like a lot of these guys are going through are going downhill, and I find it a bit shocking that they made the moves and the signings that they did. So I just wanted your take on it. I mean, do you think? I mean, let me put it this way: do you think short term? You think it's short term it's a good deal, and long term it's horrible, or vice versa? Like, how do you think? Do you think like it's going to be good overall?
So like, I think you have to take everything and you guys just said into consideration. So like, when the prospect pool is garbage, right? Like,
Yeah.
It's either ranked 32, 31, or 30 in the national. They pick one, right? It's not in the 20s. that sucks because for the team, because you don't have any low hanging fruit from a contract perspective. There's nothing you have on an entry level deal that's cost effective and giving you like ridiculous results or above the line results, right? Like those are the contracts that you need when you're cap strapped, right? They really help, and they don't have those. I think no one's surprised in Pittsburgh by this. To get Letang and Malkin, you were going to have to go term, right? So I think that's understandable, and I think everyone is in the boat of acknowledging, knowing where the prospect pool is, knowing what these contracts look like, that there is going to be, basically a really hellacious period, after the window shuts and things are done. You're not likely to have a pivot as fast as the one as the Rangers had. Right. And granted, like the Rangers got some luck, right, in the draft and lottery, and
Well, also
it,
signing Panarin helped too.
sure, yeah, and that accelerated, but Jacob Trouba for that matter, it accelerated the rate at which they were able to turn the boat around. Penguins are not going to have that ability, right? So I just don't think that they care, guys, right? I think they're saying like, this is the best opportunity we have to win a cup. I'll give you the Max Domi thing, especially because Ty Domi and Mario Lemieux are like boys, like they're literal. They like, yeah. It's just you'd think that would be one, but I'm not. I'll say this. I like the Petrie deal. I think it was necessary. John Marino, Mike Matheson. You guys will learn. You'll see. For as good as he can be, and he could be really good, there's a lot of, I used to joke. This is what I used to say. Mike Matheson in a 7-game series is going to give you 3 really good performances, 3 probably below the line performances, and you can flip the coin on the 7th. Like, who knows? Now, last year was like a revelation for him, right? But like, I think for Pittsburgh, what they needed was one size, and Jeff Petry's got it. You don't traditionally think of him as like being a super physical defenseman, but he can move people around. It's not. Look, I mean, he's a big dude, right? The Penguins have, I think, for years felt that they've needed to get bigger defensively. John Marino was a player that just frustrated the coaching staff out of their minds. Todd Reirden, I will tell you right now, especially, I think there was pushback from John Marino on taking advanced steps in handling the puck and running the breakout. So what you guys kind of ended up with is you had Evgeni Malkin on that second line doing way too much on the breakout. And I don't know if you'll remember back to Montreal series in the pandemic.
Yes.
They ate him alive. The Canadians ate Malkin alive because he had a blank check to do whatever he wanted on the breakout. And, the Habs at that time was a strong defensive team. They had the blue line covered, and you can't skate through 3 and 4 of them like that. It's not going to work. And I think that was a hard lesson for the Penguins. They wanted John Marino help. They wanted him to take that step and be a puck mover and get things, and it never happened. And I think that's why he got moved. And I think for them, Jeff Petry is going to come in. He's going to have a lower role, right? Because Letang is just an animal with ice time and gets all the big stuff, right? I think their third pairing is a lot more competent, so they're going to play it more. And I think Petry's going to be in a position where all they're really going to look for him to do is handle the breakout on that line, take that burden off Malkin, have a more limited role, play your two-way style of game and shoot the puck a lot, which is what Petry does. So I can live with that. I think people in Pittsburgh are excited for that. It's a buy low situation. You guys mentioned, it wasn't a great year for him last year. Offensively, it was like his worst year maybe ever. Frankly, his shooting percentage was in the toilet. So I think the Penguins are looking at it as like, buy low, bring him in, new role, new team, new environment. You probably going to get something positive here. Ty Smith comes in, a player who's a total disaster defensively, but Todd Reirden has a long-standing history, Cody Ceci, Justin Schultz, etc., of turning these players around and making them into something. So we'll see what happens with that. What I'll say is criticism about getting younger noted. I think there were confusing moves that were made that did baffle people. Kasperi Kapanen's one.
Yeah.
Coming off just the worst year of his career, scored 11 goals, looked helpless at times, and he comes back. He's making more money than Danton Heinen, and Danton Heinen scored 15 goals at even strength. That's 4 more goals than Kapanen had all year. So I think, from you asked, there's a fair question to Hextall, like, what is that? Like, what are we doing here? Jan Rutta comes in. Great signing, but like, where's he playing? Third pairing, sure, but you already had guys down there. You have 9 NHL competent defensemen right now. So I don't know that the team that they have in current state is what's going to, is the team they're going to have like Thanksgiving. I think they're going to have to move D. I think they're going to have to clear space. And I think somebody's going to have to go somewhere. That probably maybe nets you some forward depth, some help somewhere else, like a hockey type trade. So I think that's something Ron Hextall probably wanted to do. It didn't come about at the draft or in the first couple weeks of free agency. So now I think you wait until somebody gets hurt on another team. They have a shortage of D. They need someone. They're probably calling you because you got 9 NHL ready D. So I think, so to your point, guys, like I think there were confusing decisions.
Yeah.
I don't know that you were ever going to make any signings that were going to make you significantly younger in any meaningful way. But you ruined your chance of doing that by keeping Kapanen, and like I know Brock McGinn is another player that a lot of people have questioned how he fits into this roster. So I just don't think Hextall's done. I know this is a very long-winded answer. I just don't think Hextall's done. And I think that overall, I think most people feel like the Penguins are a better team. Their depth is different, for at least defensively. They've got the forward group is essentially exactly the same, and it's not very deep. And I think if you look at the bottom 6, the question now is who's going to score goals down there. But I think that, again, just given the hand that Hextall was dealt and noting, what he inherited, I think this is probably their best chance, as far as running it back goes. This is probably the best chance they had. So.
Well, here's the thing. So because I believe that if Malkin or Letang would have gotten offers from other teams, it would have been a shorter term, but probably the same money. I think anywhere else. I think Pittsburgh gave him the best deal. If like from what
I
I've
don't.
from
It's
what I
tough to
see.
say. I know Montreal was like the landing spot that a lot of people speculated for Kris Letang. Given where he's from, but I don't. I don't know that he would have taken. The one thing I'll tell both of you is I think they both players knew this is probably their last deal, right?
Yeah.
So you got to be careful from their perspective to make sure you don't short yourself, right? Because after 3 years or 4 years, it's not going to be easy to get another deal that's fruitful anyway, right? So I think for them, I don't. It's tough for me to say. I don't know what if other deals got floated to them. It's hard for me to say. But I
Because I
have
mean,
to think. I have to think that at the end of the day, there were sacrifices made, and I'll put like Malkin especially, guys. Malkin especially because it became very clear at very early stage that the priority was to get Letang done, right?
Yeah.
Malkin had to wait. He had to wait a long time. Sidney Crosby was involved in that process at the end, right? Like supposedly, according to my colleague Josh Yoye at The Athletic, it was Crosby that made the call to both parties and said, like, we've got to get back to the table here. This is ridiculous. So it was hard. It was hard to do it. It took a really, really long time. It was tenuous. Rust was easy, and then I think after Rust, everything else was just really difficult. With Letang, he finished 7th in Norris voting last year.
Yeah.
In a pool of players that are all like younger than 24. Right? So I have to mention that because he was at an elite level last year, I think. Looking at the assignments he took, the results he gave out from those assignments, he was in an elite level. So I think that was the first priority, and then from there. So I think there were sacrifices that were made on both sides. I think to your point, guys, I think both players probably could have got a more dollar amount, but I think for them it was more about making a decision that was sorry, it's my cat, that was going to secure their financial future, and make sure they weren't going to be left in a couple years scrambling around, trying to milk out, more money from, somewhere else and ruining their legacy in the process, right?
Yeah.
There's something, it's rare to see players in the National Hockey League these days go from beginning to end with one team. And that's probably going to happen here. I know that you guys have mentioned the Crosby thing, but let me float this to you. I do think that when Crosby's contract's up, that's it. And the reason I say that is he's in a relationship now. That sounds so stupid to say of an adult, but hear me out, guys. He's punted every life responsibility away.
Yeah.
Kris Letang and Evgeni Malkin have a family. They have children, right? Crosby has punted all of that. So whereas they may have those extra years in them, I don't think Crosby does, because I think he wants to do that stuff and dedicate 100% of his time to it, right? Like, this isn't a situation where I think he wants to linger around. I think he wants to be done with hockey and then go away, right? For a while. He'll come back, I'm sure. He'll probably buy stake in the Penguins and owe them along with FSG one day. But I think he wants to do that stuff. And I think he hasn't been able to, and I don't think he'll do it until he's done. And I think that may be the thing that, at the end allows him to peacefully ride off as one of the best players to ever play the game.
I want to kind of talk a little bit about the Jeff Petry trade a little bit. So obviously, I know you said that you really liked it and stuff, but I know a lot of Penguins fans were disappointed that they had to move Mike Matheson in order to get Jeff Petry. And just, kind of a question here from No Holding Back. He says, will Jeff Petry and Ryan Poehling bounce back with the Pens? Obviously, in your opinion, do you think that, with the acquisition of Jeff Petry and Ryan Poehling and obviously the loss of Mike Matheson, do you see a situation where both Jeff Petry and Ryan Poehling do bounce back and end up becoming in Jeff Petry's case back to kind of his old form that he was when he was in Montreal, and Ryan Poehling maybe finding a fresh start and turning into that third line center that he could potentially become in the future with a change of scenery and new coaching. So what's your thoughts just on that?
Well, I think both. I'll speak less for Poehling, but I know especially for Petry, his best hockey came under St. Louis, right? I think the style of play changed, and I think the environment was different, and it sort of suited his needs and skills as a player a little bit more. He'll get more of that here. I think it's reasonable to expect him to have a rebound because he's going to play with Evgeni Malkin. It's a heck of a boost. And I don't think it really matters, who's on the other side. I mean, you're probably looking at a combination, I think, of Jason Zucker, Evgeni Malkin, and Rickard Rakell, or Brian Rust. So that's a good group. That's a good group of players to be around. He'll have Marcus Patterson on his side defensively, and Patterson is just a defensive specialist, not a household name, but a guy who's really just strictly focused on taking care of the puck on the way out of the zone and not letting anyone into the zone with it. Really strong performances with zone entry denials. Really strong performances of breaking it out, and I think that'll allow Petry to do his thing. Having that guy back there is really just focused on keeping the house tidy. Let Petry join the rush, be who he is. So I expect a rebound. For Poehling, I still want to stress that it is, I think, a little bit of a different environment for him, especially from a center perspective. This system in Pittsburgh is really about being on the front foot, getting up ice, forechecking effectively. And Poehling's always put up really strong defensive numbers, right? I mean, that's always been his game, but I think he's not a terrible skater. He's not immobile. He'll fit in as far as, getting up ice and forechecking and providing that pressure is concerned. He's got a fight in front of him, I think, to get in the lineup. And, the Penguins, from a center perspective, they've got, Crosby, Malkin, Carter, and Bluger. They're pretty set there. He's not getting into this lineup as a center right out of the gate. So, I think it'll be interesting to see what direction they take him in camp, and what role he's playing early on. Is it a depth center role? Do they put him on the wing and try him there? I think at the end of the day, people were sad to see Mike Matheson go, especially coming off the year that he had. It was, immensely strong. I mean, he was really good. But I think that the consistency thing, right? I'll also mention this to you guys with Matheson. His worst hockey came in increased minutes. So as the season went on, the Penguins, I don't know if you know this or not, guys, but they built the arena. PPG Paints Arena is built on the site of Old West Penn Hospital. And center ice is right about where the morgue was. So if you ever wanted to know why they had so many man games lost to injury, it's probably because they built their rink right on the site of an old, it's haunted, is what it is. So, so when everybody got hurt, because they always do, Matheson moved up. And I understand that like he and Letang are kind of the same style guy, right? They both want to have the puck on their stick and they both like to move it, but it stunk. It wasn't good. And I think it's like as time went on and Matheson's role grew, the questions and people had in Pittsburgh was, is there a ceiling here? You know, is pairing two the highest you can go with Matheson? And then there's also a lot of offensive shifts they're fun to watch, but they don't produce anything. And he'll dangle through a couple guys, burst across the blue line. Next thing you know, he's got the puck behind the net, his back to everybody, and two dudes pinned up against him. And now you're wondering, well, now what are we doing? So I think there's always that sort of wild card element to Matheson. I kind of think that's the portrait I would play. But if he can here's two things I'll tell you. If he can maintain the confidence level he had, because coming over from Florida, I don't know if you guys remember, there was a really brutal hit he was involved in. He got suspended. And when the Penguins inherited him, they kind of had to, I mentioned their penchant for piecing players back together again. That was one, I think, getting him more confident, especially with his offensive skills. It happened. I think it's got to stay consistent. And I think it's got to, that's it. I mean, there's no two. It's got to be consistent. And if he can do that, he's always going to have hiccups defensively. I think most offensive defensemen do. Jeff Petry did, right? He wasn't perfect defensively. Matheson's the same way. I think he's made huge gains there. But that night to night approach, right? And remember what I said to you about the 7-game series, you get 3 of one, 3 of another, and flip a coin for the 7th. That's got to even itself out a little bit. It did last year, but is that the exception to the rule, or is that the new normal? Montreal's going to find out.
Well, when it comes to Jeff Petry, I think he's going to do I think he's going to do really well in Pittsburgh. I find the reason why he did bad in Montreal, besides him not getting along with Dominic Ducharme in that system, I think because Shea Weber went down, there was like a lot of pressure on him being like the main guy, and now that he's playing under Kris Letang, I mean there's nothing to worry about there, right? Kris Letang is the star of that show. And when it comes
no
to
power play work either, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the other thing that you don't have to have a burden about.
And when it comes to Ryan Poehling, I mean, listen, I knew from the first game that he played in Montreal that it wasn't going to work out. I always thought he was going to be like a third, fourth line guy, great defensively. But when I went to watch the first game he played, and it was against the Maple Leafs, he scored 3 goals and won in the shootout.
Yep.
There was a guy right behind me who said, "That's it. We have the next Gretzky." I was like, "That's it. It's done from here. Like everybody's gonna go. They're gonna put so much pressure on this guy. It's done. I'm like, it's not gonna work out." And I mean, listen, it didn't. He does need a change of scenery. I don't see him becoming the next, Malkin or Crosby. Definitely not. But maybe I would see him as a fourth line, third at best. That's where I would put him. He's just kind of depth.
And I think what's interesting too about Ryan Poehling, he's a guy kind of like you mentioned. His defensive numbers are really good. He was always really good defensively for the Canadians. He was on a penalty kill too at times last season, and even when he was called up. So I don't doubt that in a shutdown role for Pittsburgh, I think he's going to do well. For me, I'm kind of interested, and I kind of want to get into a little bit of the topic. We talked about Ty Smith a little bit, but the Pittsburgh Penguins have a history of trading their first round picks. This season, obviously, they didn't. They decided to use that selection to pick up Owen Pickering, and I just wanted to know your thoughts a little bit on the Penguins drafting him. And obviously, I honestly thought we obviously attended the draft. Me, Kris, and I, and obviously our co-host Christopher as well. And me and Kris both predicted that we thought Pittsburgh was going to go for a forward. We thought that they were going to go for some more offensive, young talent, since they don't really have that. We know there's Samuel Poehling, but besides that, it doesn't really look promising for the Penguins up top moving forward. And we were very surprised that they ended up picking Owen Pickering. Now, I have a few Penguins fans that I'm friends with that told me that they liked the selection, but that they were kind of expecting maybe a forward to get taken. So just kind of your thoughts on them drafting Owen Pickering, and were you surprised that they went with a defenseman instead of a forward, or did you expect them to take a defenseman at 21? Was it 21 or 22?
So 21. So about 2 weeks before the draft, 3 weeks before the draft when the season ended, I tweeted, now that it's all said and done and it's all over with and the Penguins are finished, we can get down to serious business like them drafting Owen Pickering.
Oh my God.
And they nailed it. So it's like the only time I've ever done that in my life, I think. Like I've actually called it out like that. But it was, for me, guys, and I think for the Penguins, it was a best player available situation. We talked about how bare the cupboard is. You can't be picky now. You can't say I want a wing, I want a center. Pickering was, I think, their best player available. And for them, I think that they were surprised that he was there. And and it was a no-brainer. Best player on the list. I think other than goalie, I think they probably, because they're so stacked at goalie, that's the one place where they have like an embarrassment of riches in the prospect. I mean, they traded Callie Klang, in the Ricard Raquel deal, and he was arguably the best of the bunch. And they're still grade A in goalie prospects, even having dealt him. So anything other than goalie, I think they probably would have skipped that. But that was the approach. It was take the best player on the board, because you just, at this point, you need bodies. There's nobody there, right? Sam Poehling, I don't think is going to play in the National Hockey League.
Wow.
I don't. I mean, I just think his skating it's not gotten better, right? And last year was like a good year for him. His pro year wise was good, but I don't think anyone looks at him and thinks like slam dunk, like can't miss. I don't know that you'll see him this year.
Wow.
So, it is what it is. I don't know if you guys remember Eric Tangrady, but they're kind of like on that same development path, right? So,
That's it.
the best thing you have going right now, probably in the minors, is Valtteri Putin. And you guys will probably look at me like I have two heads. Who is that? Exactly. He was drafted in the 7th round. Got super hot in Finland, just super hot, and came over and stayed hot in North America. Scored a goal in his first NHL game. Looked competent. I think there's some work to do defensively for him. He loves scoring, doesn't like playing defense a whole lot. But that's probably, from a hype perspective, I'll say. You have other players in the mix like Drew O'Connor and Radim Zahorna. Pierre-Olivier Joseph is going to fight with Ty Smith for that last spot defensively this year, but that's it. That's all. There's nothing else. Tristan Brose is going to be in Denver this year, and it'll be a change of scenery for him, but he didn't impress a lot of people at Minnesota. So I think, it was just about, like, again, getting bodies in and picking the best player available. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, guys. I think as it goes on, that'll continue to be the mantra over and over and over again. It's just go out, best player on the board, bring him into the system, and let's go.
Do you think that now, obviously, like as we've seen in the past too, do you think that in the future for the next couple of years, do you think that if Pittsburgh has the opportunity to trade, the first round pick now moving forward, do you think they're still going to do it, or do you think that now, they're going to be a little bit more cautious with the fact that, hey, we've traded first round picks for the last couple of years, we don't really have a good prospect pool. Maybe we'll keep our first round pick and just kind of, try to see if we can help our team, improve or develop. Or kind of get the player that we want, but not try to give up that valuable asset because like you said, the prospect pool is one of the weakest, if not the weakest, in the NHL. And so I think as a team, I know that they're looking at short term and saying we don't really care about right the prospects right now. We want to win now, but I think they still got to think about the future a little bit, right? You gotta have guys in the pipeline ready to come in once this is all said and done, anyways, right? So just do you think that they would? Continue to explore the option of trading a first round pick, or do you think that they're more going to be more cautious about it now and actually start picking with them? Because I know that I know Penguins fans that have been frustrated that they've traded their first round picks every year for guys that haven't necessarily, lived up to the expectations at time too, right? So there's that as well.
I do think they're done, guys, and I'll tell you why. Because the trading a first round pick culture type thing they were in there, that was a part of home run trades, right?
Yes.
They don't have the room to do those anymore. They don't. Their cap situation is a living hell. It's a nightmare. And they're not. You just don't see these days.
Yeah.
superstars get dealt in pure hockey trades. If a team is dealing a superstar, they are likely in a situation where they want to recoup assets that are, a rebuild, right?
Yeah.
They don't want Jason Zucker and, Kasperi Kapanen, So the Penguins are no longer in a position to do those things. And I think for that reason, don't get me wrong, like the future thing is huge too, right? They know, I mean, I think for Hextall, he got here and opened up the fridge and was like, oh, damn it, this is bad. So the light didn't even turn on. So I think 100% guys. Yes. 100%. That is a part of this. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't know if you wanted to address something, Kris, but I saw.
Yeah, I mean,
but
I was going to say something about. Well, I mean, no holding back. Kind of threw in Jason Zucker is my breakout player for the Pens, and I think the Pens make the players as they are in a win now mode. I mean,
Jason, no holding back must have been cruising around some Pittsburgh message boards at some point over the course of the last couple weeks. Here's the thing about Jason Zucker is just at no point lived up to the potential that I think he had when he came over from Minnesota.
Okay.
Like that trade it made so much sense, to put him, in the top 6, whether it be it was going to be with Malkin. He's never going to break the Gensel train. The Gensel Crosby connection is here to stay forever. But you think about the skill set: quick shot, quick release, can find space, good on the forecheck, decent in the boards in the battle areas. You would say, man, what a great partner for Malkin. Look about Malkin turned James Neal into a 40-goal scorer, right? Similar type player, not as good of a shot. But I for me, I'm kind of like, we're all sitting here saying what happened, right? It's never worked out. He's been injured a ton throughout his time here. He's not been able to stay healthy. He's gone through slumps where his scoring and shooting percentage has just gone in the toilet, the historical lows. And that's luck. A lot of that's luck. It's cold streaks happen in hockey, guys. You know that. The best goal scorers in the league sometimes go cold. I mean, look at Ovechkin. He goes on cold streaks. So Zucker, it's been the worst of everything for him. And it's just a question now is how much longer can this last? You know what I mean? How many more things can go wrong? And I think if you can get a long stretch of him being healthy in the lineup, that may just, that could be the thing that turns it around. And he just got to be there sometimes and be present. So he battled against the Rangers. I think that was I think a lot of people who were out on Jason Zucker went back in. And even though he didn't find the score sheet a lot against New York, he fought hard. He was on that forecheck. He was noticeable. People were talking about him, that broadcast was talking about him. So I think that was a good sign, and he's coming in healthy. He's coming. I think that is that's a good call out in the chat. And I think that's definitely a player that everybody is looking at and saying we need more, if we want to go far and we know the depth isn't great in Pittsburgh offensively, that is somebody that has got to score 20 plus goals this year.
So just it's kind of funny, right? Because you mentioned it before that the Penguins maybe weren't done and that they were looking to maybe trade guys. And I was actually going to suggest that maybe they trade Jason Zucker, right? Because he's got a year left, $5.25 million. But one thing that I found very interesting, and maybe it could still happen, but you talked about the Penguins not being done. Evan Rodriguez has yet to be signed by a team in the NHL. And obviously he hasn't been signed by the Penguins. We talked about how they brought back Kasperi Kapanen. I'm surprised they didn't bring back Evan Rodriguez. This is a guy that last year when the Penguins dealt with all those injuries, he came in and really he broke out. He was fantastic for Pittsburgh. And
it looked like Mike Bossy.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were surprised about it. Too, that they didn't really expect him to be, this guy that came in and start, performing at a high level. And he was a fantastic player for the Penguins. So I'm just kind of surprised. Obviously, you see where the Penguins are at and see that Evan Rodriguez is still available. Do you see, maybe a rekindling there where, he does return to Pittsburgh and maybe turns into that third line player? And obviously they have to move cap space to do that, but maybe they move Jason Zucker's contract and bring back Evan Rodriguez. How do you see that potentially playing out? Because I'm surprised they haven't brought him back. I've been very surprised that they just let him walk in free agency, and I'm surprised he hasn't been signed yet either by a team. So just your thoughts on that.
I'm surprised too, guys. I mean, he's not going to command a ton of money, right?
No.
Or maybe that's the problem. maybe he is. I don't know. it's a tale of two stories, though, right? It's the first part of the year that you mentioned, where he was, on a 50 goal pace or something. Everything he touched turned to gold. And I wrote an article for The Athletic that took a look at the video to try to discern what was going on. And what we found was that his zone entries were way, way up, right?
Yeah.
Um, carrying the puck across the blue line with possession, confident in those areas. And then in the second half of the year, it went away. All those things were gone. Points per game dropped like a rock. He wasn't controlling the game in even strength like it was before. The zone entries went away. So, Holy, I think, really at the end of the day was a situation where the consistency just isn't there. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know what's made other teams, seemingly allergic to signing the guy, right? Because there's a lot of things he does well. I think sometimes even when he's not scoring, I think there's value he provides to you defensively, and just the way he skates and forechecks. He's a disruptor. That's got value. I'm kind of surprised. So I don't know if it's a situation where I don't know if it's a situation where he's looking for something different and is waiting for the right thing to come along, or if what he's looking for isn't matriculating at all, and now he's kind of just stuck, and he's outweighted himself. But I will say I'm surprised because again, he's a player with a lot of utility, and I think he's a player that most of the time is giving you a lot of above the line performances.
Yeah. And just on the Jason Zucker thing, do you think that the Penguins could, I wasn't he shopped at one point during the deadline or at the draft? I heard rumors that maybe he was being shopped by the Penguins. Do you think that there's a possibility that if they do decide to make a move, that he's maybe the odd man out or one of the defensemen that you said that they might have to trade because they have too many?
No, I think if there's a hockey trade, guys, to be made and multiple pieces you're moving around, I wouldn't rule a Zucker move out because you mentioned the salary piece, right? I mean, that's a lot of money, right? And I think especially if the production's not there, his name hasn't been destroyed. The name power of Jason Zucker is not like people don't look at him as a washed player, right? So I think, yeah, I do think that there's a situation where if the right deal comes along, I want to be clear, guys, they'd have to get a forward back, right?
Yeah.
They wouldn't be able to just lose him and not replace him with somebody else. Whether it's of equal, greater, or lesser value, they'd have to get a body back that can play, preferably in the top six, I think, right? So, but that being said, another name I'll just throw. I do think I'm going to go back to is I do think it's defensemen. Honestly, Luca, like that. There's just so many of them, and they have so much money committed to D that it's almost impossible to consider like them not doing it. And I think one name everyone's kind of looking at, and this sucks to say, is like Brian Dumoulin, right? Like he's had so many good years with Pittsburgh, right?
I thought Habs are going to pick him up,
but
at some point.
He's had a lot of lower body injuries, and over the years he's slowed down. And what made him such an effective defenseman was he was this big, rangy guy with a long reach that was a good skater that could get from point A to point B really well. And I years ago I wrote this article about how like one night he almost kept up with Connor McDavid, and it was just because he had that big. He didn't do it, right? Nobody does, but like he showed a good way of trying to keep fast players in front of you, and that's not the same anymore, right? And it's like if that's not the same, he's got so much name power from winning those cups. He was such an integral part of those cups, and people, I think, general managers always overpay for that. They always overpay for cups. So I think if Ron Hextall really wanted to make the splash, I think that's where he might look to go. Now you got to get again, like that's a big loss, and he's still a good player. But there were times last year, guys, we talked about Matheson moving up. That means Dumoulin moved down, right? Like so if he's up, Dumoulin's down, right? So I think there was times last year where he wasn't on that top defensive pairing, and that's says it all. So that's a name I'm looking at too. And I talked a lot earlier about Marcus Petterson and how good I think he is and how defensive. He's really the best defensive defenseman the Penguins have right now. But I wouldn't be shocked if it was him because same reasons. I mean, like I think that like reasonable contract. I think that Penguins there's maybe a possibility they could get a big time, not a big time, but a decent forward for their depth out of that trade. So I think what Ron Hextall has done, to your point, Luca, is like accrued a lot of good D that he could at any point trade for a forward.
Okay. All right. Just kind of, I'm going to ask this to both of you guys, just kind of my final question. But obviously, we saw that no holding back's breakout player is Jason Zucker. What are your guys' breakout players this season? For the Penguins. Chris, I'm going to start with you, and then Jesse, you can kind of answer this question afterwards.
I don't know if it counts as breakout, but do I think he's gonna have a huge turnaround? I would go with Jeff Petry. I think we're gonna have the Jeff Petry from the season before what we just witnessed this year. I think he's gonna come back. That's gonna be my player.
And Jesse, what about you?
Sidney Crosby.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, though, like last year was uncharacteristic for him in that he had that wrist surgery, and the way he tells the story is like the wrist was beat. It's been beat for years, but sometime in the summer it'd get better, right? And he'd be cool, and it'd get hurt again in the season, but then in the summer it'd get better. But then last year it just didn't get better. So the summer kept going and kept going and kept going, and it never came back. So he has a surgery, comes back in the end of October, no camp, poor condition, because you can't, I don't want to say poor condition. You can't replicate game speed in practice. You can't do it, right?
No,
so he was well conditioned, but behind where everybody else was, given his situation. And then he got COVID. So now it's 2 more weeks before he can come back. So by the time he gets in the lineup, it's almost Thanksgiving. And he just wasn't the same for a couple weeks. And then he got settled in, the chemistry came back, the timing came back, and here's old Sidney Crosby again lighting the league on fire. This year you're not going to have that. There's no adjustment period. There's no surgery. Jake Gensel's healthy. He's probably going to play on a top line of Jake Guentzel, Brian Rust. That is a heavy hitting first line, man.
I think the first line is actually projected to be Guentzel, Crosby, and Raquel, right?
I don't think we know that yet. Yeah, we're going to see what Mike Sullivan does. Mike Sullivan, I don't know that they gave Russ the contract they gave him to play him on the second line. And with all due respect to Raquel, who also got a new contract, right? They both did. But Brian Russ making, there's that old sunk cost fallacy, guys, right? Where you don't want to lose the money, so you're always going to play the bigger contract up top. I think it'll go. I think at the end of the day, they're going to go both ways. But either way, Crosby's going to be surrounded by good players, and he's going to be fresh. There were a lot of people that forgot about Sidney Crosby last year. I think this will be a much different experience. I don't, what's kept him from what's kept his game from disintegrating is he still sees the game 7-8 steps ahead of everybody else. And his puck distribution is still such a ridiculous level. I think it'll carry him for years. I don't think he'll end his career having a season below a point per game.
I mean, it's crazy because you talked about his broken wrist. He still had 84 points in 69 games last year.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. It's still insane.
And his pace was, through the first couple games he came back, was nowhere near that. So it was really, once it turned on, and he started to bring it in mass, and the points were stacking. There were nights where, he was putting up 2-3 in a row. And I mean, Jay Guentzel, over 40 goals again, right? So, it's weird to say that, but I feel like last year the national media, even the metropolitan media, was out of sight, out of mind with Sidney Crosby. And I don't know, I just have that hunch that, he's been around the cup all off season, and you just get the sense that motivating factor is certainly there for him.
So my breakout player. I'm gonna go with Ty Smith, and the reason I'm gonna go with Ty Smith is because I'm actually really high on him. When Pittsburgh got him, I texted both the guys, and I was like, "This is a steal. Pittsburgh got a steal. This kid's gonna be fantastic." And I just honestly believe that he will be. I heard rumors that he may start in the AHL. I don't know how true that is or how accurate that is, but if
Luke, it's going to come down to him and POJ, Pierre-Olivier Joseph, for that last spot on that left side. Yeah.
But that's it. I'm super high on Ty Smith. I think he's a guy that, if given an opportunity and put in a right position, he can absolutely succeed in Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh have the tendency to, turn guys' careers around a little bit. They've done that before, so wouldn't be surprised they do it again. I don't know if, Chris, you have anything else to add, but I just wanted to say one last thing. Obviously, we kind of know your prediction, but we'll say it anyways. Do you think that the Penguins? Obviously, I think they make the playoffs. Do you think that they're a team that is on paper right now at this very moment, looking at where the league is as a whole? Do you think that Pittsburgh's considered a contender, or do you think that they are still maybe 1 or 2 tweaks that they need to make before being considered a contender? And obviously, I'm not trying to bet on Sidney Crosby here, but bet against Sidney Crosby here. But they are getting old, so.
No, you're 100% right. I think the Penguins are near the top of the second tier of teams in this league. Okay. Right? That's where I had them last year. I don't think that's going to change a ton. I think you have your Colorados, your Tampas, that elite stack, right? And then take a step down, and I think the Penguins are at or near the top of that next group. I'll tell you what, though, guys. I don't know that there's a move or a series of moves to be made to put them there. That's true. Think about it. Like, what do they have to do to get to Colorado's level?
Draft.
I don't know that you can. Like, Cal McCarrs aren't growing on trees, right? So
exactly.
I think they're a team that, what you hope for them is they go in the playoffs healthy and hot. And if they could do that, they could certainly win a round. They may be able to win 2, and then you pray the hockey gods are on your side for the rest. So yeah.
And you pray you have good goaltending too.
Yeah, Tristan Jarry's gotta
Amen, man. Yep. Amen.
Anyway, so I that's all I really have to say, Chris. I don't know if you want to just wrap this up.
Yeah, we could wrap it up. So, guys, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. We're trying to get to 1,200 subscribers. Thank you for the 1K. Obviously, that happened a while ago, but we love you guys. Thank you, Jesse, for coming on. We really appreciate it, and we'd love to have you back anytime you feel. Anytime you want to talk about the Penguins, we're here.
And ping me anytime, guys. It was fun talking to you, and I appreciate the time. It's always good to talk some hockey in the summer.
Sounds good. So, everybody, see you on the next episode.
Yes, sir.